Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden, and in this video I'm doing an end of May tour of the vegetable garden, and I'm going to show you what's been going well, what hasn't been going well, and just give you a general overview of what's happening. The two beds beside me was where the season started in mid to late March. So I transplanted broad beans, mainly Bunyard's exhibition, and they're doing really well and they're just beginning to fruit. And I found that overwintering broad beans doesn't seem to work too well here, and also vermin and mice seem to get them during the winter. So I started these right at the beginning of March, transplanted them, and they're doing well, and it's nice to see a lot of bumblebees flying around them from time to time. Here's the onion bed, and I love onions, you can never really get enough of them. At the top, a self-sown lettuce growing around a different onion variety. It's a senshi variety, I believe, which isn't performing quite as well, but we're getting loads of lettuce, so that's good. Now this is Sturon onion for the rest of the bed, and it's looking really healthy. There's a couple of other bits of lettuce that I'm just letting grow, because why not? And then here I multi-sowed radish, like I do every year around the onions, just to get that extra crop. And I'm just removing them now because we've had a lot of warm weather here in Wales. It's been really tricky to try and keep up with watering, and I'm not a huge fan of radish, and I've got fresher ones on the way, so these are going to be taken out, but they did serve their purpose. So here's the top of the broad bean bed, and I'm just walking past the succession sowing of Bunyards around 2 weeks behind the rest, and you can see the real height difference. And then here we've got the sweet peas. I've got 2 wigwams, and I love sweet peas. They've been spending a lot of time putting on all of this side growth, but they're about to start flying up the wigwam, which is very exciting. Here we've got some kind of speedwell flower that's absolutely beautiful, and I don't know where it's come from, but I really like it. And then finally I've planted 4 little clumps of parsley around, just because there's a bit of spare space that was begging to be used, so it's nice to have some herbs in as well. Here we have a trellis which is around southeast facing, and it's the nicest area to train some things along. We've got a pear here, and it's great to see these little pears come through because these had set just before the late frost that we had earlier in May. However, it's a sorry story for the plum. The blossom got hit and we haven't got any plums set, which is sad. But what's looking pretty good though is the oca. We've got oca here, New Zealand yam. Don't confuse it with okra, it's OCA, oca. We're growing in tyres, and I know that there's a few of you who worry about growing in tyres, but what we do is we then, if we need to fill tyres with more compost, we line them with an old compost bag, for example, to stop any leaching. So we're about to line these tyres and kind of earth them or hill them up, just to try and improve our oca harvest. And then we have the silvanberry, which is kind of the king of soft fruit for this garden. It's going to be laden in fruits, and we can see a lot of them beginning to form. There's a beautiful show of flowers, but it's really important at this stage that it gets lots of water. So the other day I mulched it with wood chip, and we're giving it plenty of water, and hopefully we'll get some great fruits in return. This is now kind of a bit of a mix match of different things. It's mainly a salads bed, so we've got Swiss chard and perpetual spinach mixed. Bright Lights is the variety, and it's looking nice. It's really important as well to water these, as well as the 2 rows of lettuce, and you might see a gap. We've had quite a bit of vole and mole problems this year, which has been a little bit of a pain, but we'll come on to that a bit later on. There's now 2 rows as well of kind of oriental greens, brassica oriental greens, but these have been hit bad by flea beetle, which I'm also going to cover a little later on. We've now got 2 varieties of dwarf beans here. So this is a French dwarf bean, this is Opera, and then this is Yin Yang, which is a very exciting thing to have growing, and hopefully this year it will be a success because we've struggled on previous years. And then I've got some more lettuce here that I transplanted and had a bit more damage here with the valves, but it's looking okay, beginning to grow and about to be able to start harvesting it soon. And there's a spare space which I don't know what's going to go in here yet, perhaps some radish or something. And then finally, right at the other side of the bed is a row of peas. These are sugar snaps, Nordley peas they're called, and they don't grow very tall, around 45-50 centimeters, so just under 2 foot, hence why the structure isn't that big, but I can't wait to eat them. Here's one of my favourite parts of the garden, and we have alderman's pea. Grows to around 5 foot, so should kind of reach the top here, and I'm growing it as an L shape, mainly to try and create a bit of shadow in the middle. So behind these peas I actually have lettuce growing as well, so some more salads, and there's space for some more things to plant in afterwards, which I'm undecided on what to grow. There's also a little courgette plant just to make the most of that corner, as well as some cornflower, just to add a bit of colour. So it's going to be interesting to see how this looks in a couple of months' time, because the main tour is going to be in July. Then the bed behind me, bit of a sad story. Parsnips didn't work out because we had serious vole and mold damage here that just destroyed all of the parsnips. But that's okay, it's a blank canvas to put something else there. The potatoes got decimated as well by that late frost in May. However, you can see how much they've bounced back. Now these potatoes here, the biggest ones, the reason why they're biggest is because the fleece overlapped. One layer of fleece wasn't enough, but where it overlapped, these stayed great. So you can see how they should be looking at this height, and it won't take long for these all to catch up, and I'm looking forward to some nice potatoes. The bed to my left here is nice and empty because this is ready for a load of brassicas to be transplanted, primarily kale, but also some cauliflower and broccoli as well. So this will be filled in about a week or two. I've capped the end with some radish that I had spare. And then at this side, the bottom end, I've got a row of 5 dwarf lupins that I've planted just over a month ago, and they're flowering already, although hopefully the display next year will be nice. My mum's display down in the flower garden is looking absolutely beautiful at the moment, as you can see. I've also got a wigwam here of runner beans. I'm actually trying to be quite strategic by placing lots of wigwams, growing mainly flowering things up them around the garden, not just as a nice visual standpoint, but also for beneficial insects. And underneath it I've intercropped parsley. So if you want to find out a bit more about intercropping, then make sure you check out that video. Then to my right, this is gradually going to be turned into a perennial vegetable bed. We have 7 asparagus crowns that have come through. I've mulched these with wood chip, and I'll come on to the reason why with the main asparagus bed. I've also got good King Henry, some kind of perennial broccoli, I believe. And then here we have 3 hostas, which also got hit by the frost, but they're bouncing back. And then some dwarf Jerusalem artichokes that I've just put in, and these are going to be quite fun, as well as the other artichokes, which I'll show you in a second. And then we've got a Caucasian spinach, where I need to create some kind of structure for it to climb up, because it can grow to around 3 meters or 10 foot. And then a little bit further up, I've got some more sugar snap peas because you can't have enough of them. And then some sweet peas here, which were planted around the same time as the other ones. But because there's a kind of a dip, there's a microclimate in this garden where this got hit by the frost more than the sweet peas up there. So these were set back a little bit actually, and you can see the yellowing. And then finally, just a little bit of extra space to put in some leftover lettuce. Here's the main Jerusalem artichoke patch, and these got a really light hit by the frost. Just some of the leaves got burnt on the outer sides, but apart from that, they're all beginning to grow quickly and they're going to shoot up. I mean, every day they seem to grow. You can see we've got some red currants here. They were kind of cordon trained, but then we've kind of just let them get on with it. And these always produce the biggest, reddest fruits. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll enjoy those. And then I've got the wheelbarrow here because I've been just behind me here, put down a pallet bed, and I've put 5 runner beans there as a trial to grow up this trellis. And even though this is a shadier spot in the garden, it'll be interesting to see if we get any harvest or none whatsoever. The bed to my right is the second early potato bed, and because it's the second earlies, they're behind the first earlies, which is the bed you saw earlier. And we covered these, and with one covering they didn't really get much damage at all compared to the other bed. And these are growing through nicely. I've kind of forgotten about them a bit, doing more exciting projects in the garden. So the next stage for this bed is to just go around and do a bit of a final weed, and then I won't weed it until it comes to harvesting the potatoes, because when they get really big they'll smother out any weeds that are trying to come through. We've always got lots of soft fruit as well. We've got gooseberries, black currants, red currants going around a lot of the garden. And I've got the rhubarb patch here, but I've left it this year just to its own devices because it was getting old, and I split all of the crowns back in autumn. So I'm just letting it regain its energy, and we'll start harvesting from it again next year. So the bed next to the second earlies is the squash bed for this year, and I like to grow squash using this landscape fabric that I think we're using probably for the 3rd or 4th year now. What I've done is I've burnt holes in, and then I can use it year after year, and it's a great way to warm up the soil, which is what you need when you're growing courgettes, for example, and also to retain the moisture. So 3 days ago this bed was planted up, and I've kind of got courgettes on the outside, like all green courgette, Nero di Milano, and I hope that's a courgette actually, and also shooting star, which is a wonderful yellow courgette. And then in the middle we've got some more kind of squash type. So we've got this is a chogia squash, so it's going to be a nice watery squash. So I'm looking forward to coming back and seeing this full of food. Here we are at the most sloped bed of the vegetable garden, and we've got the runner bean structure here. And it's just a nice thing when I walk through the gate just to see the structure in the top left of the garden. And the runner beans were put in around a week ago, and they've put on quite a lot of growth already. My next job with these is to actually go around and tie them now onto them, because some are following them up, but others are trying to follow up the wrong bits of twig. So yeah, that will keep me busy for around 10 minutes or so. Then down here, this is probably the scrappiest part of the garden at the moment, but everything has a reason. We've got perpetual spinach and Swiss chard that has overwintered and is now running to seed. Now the great thing about things like Swiss chard is when it runs to seed, unlike other things like lettuce, when it runs to seed it turns really bitter. This doesn't, so we can still pick off these leaves and use them in stir fries and in salads. And I'm gonna probably save the seed here, and that's the same thing that's happening here with swede. Now usually for a brassica that is more of a root veg type brassica, like swede or turnips, you preferably want around 8 to 10 plants for viable seed saving, but here I'm doing an experiment just with about 4 plants and just going to see what the seeds of those are like. And then further up the bed, ignore this self-sown pea, but I've got 4 Shetland black potatoes sent kindly by the guys over at Polycrub, based on Shetland. So it's going to be cool to harvest these to get those beautiful black tubers. So I'm looking forward to that. And this space in the front here I'm probably going to fill with more dwarf beans, because I've got a lot more on the way, and a lot of those will go into the freezer. Now, talking about beans, I've got some more dwarf beans here. It's almost a bean block. These are runner beans, again, going up yet another wigwam. Behind me I've got a cotoneaster that we just keep and every time I walk past it I can hear this buzz of bees that absolutely love it, and we'll get some nice red fruits. And then finally we've got a row here of leeks. We've got 4 different leek varieties. One of the rows kind of got destroyed also by voles, but they've kind of disappeared for now, touch wood. Don't know if bamboo counts as wood, and they're looking good, so I'm just keeping these well watered, and I'm going to let them grow until about pencil thickness, and that's when I'll plant them out, probably after I've harvested all of the broad beans. Here we are, kind of a root vegetable bed, but it's a different story down at the end. I've got coriander here, and it just smells delicious, and it's so nice to add this into salads and cooking at the moment. Now this is cornflower, and I know I've planted it too close together, but it's my first time kind of sowing it from seed, but I'm going to leave it and see what happens. And now we've got 6 rows of beetroot. And I think perhaps the most popular beetroot variety at the moment is Boltardi, and this is exactly what I'm growing here, all sown at the same time. I did get a bit of vole damage here, which is why I've got this thing which I've turned off at the moment, but it sends these kind of signals and vibrations that apparently they don't like. And then you can see I've got this row of radish growing along, and the idea is within the next day or 2 I'll sow another row here, and I can start succession sowing radish down in between the beetroot. But because I love beetroot so much, I'll probably be sowing a few more rows somewhere else in the garden later in the year. Now this is perhaps a saddest story so far. I had 5 rows of carrots in here for this first part, and this is where we had the most depressing vole damage. What they do is they go just under and kind of nip all of the roots. So this is very sporadic germination, so what I'm going to do this weekend is lift it back over, re-sow where they haven't grown through, and then put it back down, keep it well watered, and fingers crossed it'll be fine. And then at the top, this is usually and was the brassica seed bed, but we got this crazy flea beetle again this year. So last year, this year, flea beetle seemed to be affecting so many of us now, because it's so dry, and because this has been so badly affected by flea beetle, and then we got that frost, the openings in the leaves kind of killed off almost all of the seedlings, but there are still a few things left which I'm letting them grow to then transplant, but I had to restart a lot of the brassicas again in modules in the solar tunnel, which we're going to go to next. So I'm in the solar tunnel, and it is hot in here, especially if it's 25 degrees outside, even with both of the doors open. The solar tunnel has this kind of little mesh, so if it does rip, then it's only going to rip a small amount, unlike a polytunnel where a rip can quickly grow. Here is just a propagation space. As you can see, we've got loads more squash left, which are going to go around the garden. Dwarf beans on the way, some more cosmos that haven't had a chance to even put on yet. And then other bits and bobs, more beans coming through, but it's really kind of slowed down in terms of the propagation side, but these 2 kind of shelf systems have been very useful. That shelf system will soon be removed, as in that bed just here is where I'm going to be planting some gherkins and mini cucumbers, which is going to be exciting. Every year we always like to dedicate a whole bed just for tomatoes, and we've got 8 different varieties here, ranging from beefsteak to cherry tomatoes, and they're looking really healthy, but it's time over the weekend for me to come along and to start pinching out the little suckers that are coming off, just give them a bit of a tidy up and a bit of a prune. But it's nice to see some of them beginning to flower, and they're looking very healthy. I'm really pleased with them. Now you will probably be drawn to the nettles in the back. There's a reason why, a few reasons why these nettles are here. But if you want to see the real reason, then check out my video about why you need more nettles in your vegetable garden. And then this is our grapevine, which yet again got hit by the frost, even though we covered it, but it's beginning to recover. But it'll be interesting to see if the top vine running along the length of the solar tunnel will recover as well. So keep your fingers crossed for that, please, as grapes are a wonderful thing. Now this bed here is empty, a little too empty, but it's about to be planted up with all sorts of things. The most exciting thing is going to be loofahs, which I'm going to try for the first time. And then here you can see just a collection of some of the seedlings that I have at the moment. I've got pak choi, kailan kale, beetroot, and other types of kale as well, and those are some globe artichokes, as well as testing out growing swede. So there's a lot happening, but very soon this will look completely different and start to become a jungle. This is the top section of the garden, which has seen a lot of transitions. So the 4 beds behind me are all pretty new, especially the last 2 were only built in the last couple of weeks. And then I've got another bed which is going to be another perennial vegetable bed. I've got a strawberry bed that you can see we've just put over this kind of netting here to protect the birds. You can hear the blackbirds actually, and they're one of the things that like strawberries. Then this bed, you'll actually find out more about this bed on Wednesday's video, about 7 reasons why every garden needs a spare raised bed. But we've got peas, we've got black down blue pea there, which is a heritage variety, I believe. And then I've just got various things happening, and it's quite exciting sometimes to have a bed with all sorts growing in. And then along here, apart from these kind of soft fruit, which are mainly blueberries and a honeyberry, I've got a nice long border here of a few different flowers. I'm growing a lot of cosmos actually around the garden, for example down by the lupins, and also growing a lot of nasturtiums. And here is perhaps my most exciting bed this year, which has some cosmos actually in the end, just there. But this is the asparagus bed, which was planted around a month and a half ago. And what I've had to do, because it's been so dry and because I want to look after these as much as possible, I've mulched these with wood chip and then given them a really deep watering, and they're looking really nice and healthy. And then just to make the most of space, right at the end of the bed, I've put in a courgette. It's a striped courgette that I'm just going to grow out and see how that looks. You've just been on a quick tour of the garden, and stay tuned for a video in around July, early August time, where there'll be a full garden tour so you can compare the differences. Now, if you want to get a better understanding about the behind the scenes of the garden and how I do particular things, then check out my Patreon, where I put up 2 extra videos every single week showing you things that are happening in this garden, and it only costs $3 a month to join. Thank you once again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, where we look at 7 reasons why you need a spare raised bed. Goodbye.